Chapter 4. Safire, age 16, May. The breeze, warmed by the sunlight, caressed the bare skin of my arms like one of my imaginary lovers. I giggled at the thought and skipped ahead of Dagmar, the street cobbles hard through my slipper soles. "Silly creature," she said with a great deal of affection. I grabbed her hands in mine and spun us both around in circles until she was laughing and breathless, just like me. "Safire, stop! I'm getting dizzy." The world slowly stopped revolving around us as I caught my breath. "Do you think Father will let us go to the May ball this year? It's for peasants and nobles, and I've been behaving very well lately. I even said something nice to Peregrine the other day." "I'm sure Father will let us go." She shut her eyes for a moment and inhaled as we passed by the flower stall. The scent of lilies hung sweetly heavy and languid in the warm air. "What did you say to Peregrine? I don't recall anything nice coming out of your mouth." "I told him his new horse Trident was lovely, and then asked him where he stole Trident from." She snorted. "At least your rudeness seems to amuse him. Lord above, he's persistent. I would have given up on you long ago if I were him." "I wish he would give up." Wanting to distract myself from thoughts of Peregrine, I stopped at the next stall, only to find myself lost in a dream of bright color and vivid faces. "Paintings," I murmured, feeling a dazed smile gently pinch the corners of my lips. The portraits seemed so real that I glanced over the artist himself at first, an understandable mistake, as he wore black and stood between two paintings in the shadows far back under the stall awning. I only realized he was alive when he stepped forward. I gasped, then clapped my hand to my mouth to muffle a giggle. He resembled an overgrown scarecrow, tall and skinny. His bony frame seemed too large for the rest of him. His straight hair hung over his forehead in an untidy swath. It looked like he cut it himself using a dull-edged dagger. With a sharp chin and nose and blades for cheekbones, he could be hardly called handsome. But I found myself staring at him anyway. His hands and wrists in particular, his long fingers, the knobs of his bones, the dark, crinkly hair. I wanted him to touch me with those hands, the same hands that had painted these beautiful pictures. His aura, a rich teal, washed over me, sparkly and tingly soft as a tide of peacock feathers. "Safire," Dagmar said, and I jumped a little, startled from my unmaidenly lust. "See these lovely portraits? They look so real that I expect them to speak to me," I said. "Why, thank you, my lady." He inclined his head, his hair flopping in a most adorable way. My fingers itched to comb the errant strands back into place for him. He lifted his face and smiled, his bright eyes intent on mine. "I take commissions for portraits. What I have hanging here are some samples of my and my brother's work that I plan to deliver later today." His soft voice, with its lilting northern accent, flowed around the words, like the deep, clear water of a woodland stream flowing around stones. "Very nice, I'm sure. Safire, we have to get to the spice stall before she runs out of cinnamon or salt again. Can you go on ahead? I'll be along in a moment or two, I promise. I just want to ask this gentleman some questions about painting." She rolled her eyes. "Fine, don't tarry too long." Then she turned with a swirl of skirt and petticoats, leaving me to flutter my eyelashes at Sir. "May I have the pleasure of your name, sir?" I asked. He glanced down and smiled, one hand cupped around the back of his neck. How I wished it were cupped around mine. "It's not Sir, my lady. If it was, I'd be an artist at the royal court, not in common trade such as this. Terrester Greyhills, at your service." "Where did you study painting?" I glanced around at the portraits, struck by how the eyes of the subjects looked so real they seemed to follow me. I would give my teeth to be able to paint like this. "My father painted portraits and had both me and my brother apprenticed to the guild in Torior province." "How come you're in Selmer province if you were born in the north?" "My sister's husband was lost at sea, and my brother and I came here to assist her." "I'm sorry to hear about your brother-in-law." He shrugged. "Thank you, though he was not a kind man." His face darkened. I quickly changed the subject. "Have you joined the guild in Selmer province, then? I thought you had to be born here." He narrowed his eyes to slits. My lady asks many questions. I'm sorry. I looked down at my feet, peeping out from under my skirts, feeling my cheeks heat. I'm just curious, I babbled. I admire artists a great deal. I want to be one, but my father won't let me. See, the charcoal smears on my hands. I like to draw sometimes. I trailed off, swallowing as his fingers slid under my jaw. He gently tipped my face up. I should have stepped back and called him names for being audacious, but his touch was so light, his feather-soft aura trailing along my skin, so different from Peregrine's touch. Whenever Dagmar's or father's back was turned, Peregrine always seized my arm or hand as if he were a spoiled child claiming a prized toy. I'd like to draw you, Terrester Greyheels murmured. Perhaps your father would like to commission a portrait? I did step away then. You're just flirting with me to get a commission, aren't you? You're just flirting with me to get painting secrets, aren't you? He mocked. All right, out with it. Who from the guild sent you? Oseen? I must say, I thought he'd be more subtle. A pretty girl posing as a noblewoman seems an obvious spy. I'm not a spy, and I most certainly am noble-born. See my seal ring? I fisted my hands on my hips and glared at him. How dare you? Perhaps I was wrong. If you are a spy, you're terrible at it. He speculated out loud, enraging me further. I stamped on his toe. He stared down at his boot, a blank look on his face, his aura furling inward, a tight line of indigo around him. Oh no, he was in terrible pain, and I had caused it. I hadn't meant to stomp that hard. I hadn't meant to stomp at all. What a childish thing to do. I began to back out of the stall, prepared to run away and find Dagmar before I did anything else ridiculous. Then a choke escaped him, and I froze. Then he choked again, followed by a muffled snort. Are you hurt? I demanded. Hardly. He let loose peal after peal of laughter, like water spilling down a ladder of stones. You mean it didn't hurt at all? You sound disappointed, my lady. Sorry to be so amused, but you'd need steel toes to do any damage with that little foot, or kick me in a less protected spot. Deciding I had had enough mockery, I turned to leave. I just might do that next time. Good day, I tossed over my shoulder. He threw up his hands. All right, you're not a spy. I'm sorry I ever called you one. You just asked so many questions, it made me suspicious. I faltered at the edge of the awning, still half in the shadow of the stall, half in the noon light flooding the square. I want to be a painter more than anything, but my father will never let me take lessons. You should go to Sarnath. They have female painters there. In Sarnath, the guilds even allow artists who aren't apprenticed, men and women alike, to sell their wares at the markets. You have beautiful hair, he said abruptly. It shines like copper in the sunlight. I really would like to paint you, you know. I must have given him a suspicious look, for he laughed again, adding, and I didn't just say that to get a commission. You must tire of painting the nobility, flattering away double chins, moles, and freckles with your brush, and your silver tongue. Despite my cynical words, I moved back under the awning. So world-wise for one so young. He placed his fingertip on my nose. And you're wrong in one respect. I'd paint every freckle on your face. No, you wouldn't. It was my turn to laugh. I'm serious. The sudden deepening of his tone, his lingering gaze on my face, corked my laughter. We stared at each other. Then he said, his voice almost a whisper, the monarch butterfly wouldn't be so pretty without its spots. I stepped toward him, and this time I didn't stomp on his toe. This time I slid my hand around his neck, leaned up, and planted my mouth on his. It wasn't my first kiss with a man. Peregrine had kissed me on the stair landing at home back in January, a rough caress that had frightened me even as it roused me. This kiss was different. Terrester let me take the lead, his lips only parting when mine did. I enjoyed the soft touch of his mouth, so like the softness of his aura, but he didn't taste quite right. Too sweet and too cool, as if he'd spent the morning chewing mint leaves. Now that I thought about it, his aura smelled like mint, sharp and cool and sweet, Pleasant, but not for me. I could never get drunk off his kisses. As soon as the dim notion of drunkenness crossed my mind, I remembered my sister could return at any point and catch me. I broke off the kiss, muttering, "Oh dear, oh dear." "Please wait," he said. "I'm sorry. Please." But I fled before I could hear the rest of it, my face burning. Oh, what a brazen wench I was! I thought about my mother looking down on me from heaven, how ashamed she would be at my wantonness. But no, it was Mother's fault I was like this. She was the one who had left me her Sirach books, pages dog-eared at the most passionate passages. She was the one with the hot blood that I had apparently inherited. No, if anyone would end up ashamed of me, it would be Father and Dagmar. I blundered into a woman carrying a laundry basket on her head. She swayed, a stout oak in a mighty gale, with her broad feet firmly rooted to the ground. "Watch where you're going, girl," she snapped as she stepped forward again. She didn't know I was noble. I stopped and gazed after her, then looked around at the people milling through the square. None of them knew I was the daughter of Avernal of Longmarsh. Probably most of them didn't even know there was a house of Longmarsh. A small, sparrow noble house, far from the circles of the powerful, tended not to attract much notice. My sudden realization of anonymity felt oddly freeing. Sometimes I wished I wasn't noble. People didn't seem to care what peasant girls did. Peasant girls could kiss a man, and no one would accuse them of gross impropriety. Peasant girls could sell things at market, and no one would disown them for being common. A vague idea flitted through my mind on delicate butterfly wings, difficult to catch until it landed. Terrester had said that his brother's work was in the booth with his own. I hadn't thought much about it at the time, as members of the same family often sold each other's wares at the common market. Now, though, I wondered, if I were a peasant and I had a brother who was an artist, I could sell his paintings at the market, and no one would think twice about it. I could sign his name on my sketches, and people might buy them, believing them to be the work of a man and not a wicked girl. As long as they thought a man had drawn them, people might appreciate my drawings as my mother had appreciated them. I might even earn enough coin to obtain more paper and charcoals and not use my precious allowance, which was supposed to be for clothes. The problem was that I didn't have a brother, but I did have an imagination. With a vivid imagination and a ready tongue, I could easily make myself a peasant and devise an artistic brother who had to work in the fields all day and didn't have time to sell his own sketches, so I sold them for him. That was when I decided that from now on, I would sign my sketches S. Marsh. A brief twinge of guilt ran through me when I caught sight of Dagmar, still wrangling with the spice merchant's wife. If she or father ever found out I intended to sell my drawings at market like a commoner, there would be hell to pay. Of course, there would be hell to pay if they ever found out I had just snatched a forbidden kiss with a peasant artist, and that hadn't stopped me. Apparently, my pangs of conscience only served to give birth to more mischief. "Why can't I be tall and slender like you?" I carped at Dagmar as I twisted and turned in my green silk gown before her mirror. We were getting dressed for the May ball, and it seemed I had tried on every piece of clothing I possessed. "My frocks never drape right," I wailed. Dagmar snorted. "You sound just like Grandmama." I frowned at the mirror and then turned to look at her. "Really?" She scrunched her face in concentration as she reached both hands around the back of her neck to fasten her coral necklace. The clasp caught in her hair, and she uttered a word I didn't think she knew. "Dagmar!" I exclaimed, half surprised, half mocking. She shot me a narrow-eyed, narrow-lipped look. "What, you think you're the only one with ears? Father says that word all the time." "I know. Here, do you want me to help you?" She gladly relinquished the ends of the necklace. Her hair, fine as corn silk, had tangled around the clasp in a mare's nest of strands. "Just pull out the hair if you have to," she said. "No, I think I can get it." I finally freed the clasp, then fastened the errant ends together. The coral beads spilled over my fingers, cool and smooth as the ocean. "What did you mean when you said I sounded like Grandmama?" I didn't remember much about my father's mother, except hiding in her wardrobe amidst all the rustling silks and satins, enveloped in a flowery dusting of ladies' powder. Every time I smelled talcum, I thought of Grandmama. She used to whine about the drape of her frocks, too. She was shaped like you know, short and curvy. I want to be a willowy elf maid. I flapped my arms like wings and twirled through the chamber on tiptoes, pretending I could float, graceful and light as a songbird. When I stubbed my toe on Dagmar's bedpost, I inhaled sharply at the sudden pain and sank down on the counterpane. You have the oddest fancies. Anyway, my point is, Grandmama always had suitors, even when she was an old widow. They didn't seem to care for frocks draped properly or not. So if I were you, I wouldn't worry about it. She turned from the mirror, holding out her skirt. It was peach-colored silk with a crisscross pattern of light green ribbon and diamond shapes around the hem. That color flatters you, I said. You think so? She chewed her lip before she glanced at the mirror again, pinching more pink into her cheeks. You always look nice in pastels. Why so jittery, sister? You've visited that mirror at least 5 times in the last 5 minutes, I teased. I'm not jittery. She glared at her reflection as if willing it to behave itself. I just want to look presentable, that's all. Someone special going to be at the dance? Anyone I know? I persisted when she didn't answer right away. Her cheeks flushed, and this time no pinching was needed. Perhaps. I don't think you've met him, though. She put on her coral earrings to match the necklace. I bet I'll meet him tonight, I trilled, just for the satisfaction of seeing her blush deepen. When we get to the dance, how about I yell, "My sister's a likely wench"? Whichever man nods first, I'll know that's him. Safire, honestly, behave tonight, please. She suddenly looked very serious, her brow furrowed, her eyes wide, her mouth a straight line. This man's high-born, much higher than us, and a gentleman. He already has many responsibilities, even though he's only a few years older than me. He's far too earnest to appreciate your silly jests. You mean he never laughs? Good Lord! For all his faults, at least Peregrine had a sense of wit and made amusing remarks on occasion. I couldn't imagine a suitor who never laughed. Of course he laughs, she said, as indignant as a sow bear roaring in defense of her cub. He just takes things more seriously than you do. Most people take things more seriously than you do, Safire. Her aura filled the chamber with golden green light like the sun shining through new leaves. You really like him, don't you? I can tell. I offered her my sauciest grin. He must be a Landers. Her mouth formed an O of surprise. How do you know that? I rose from the bed and slung my shawl over my shoulders. What fun is being a witch if I can't use it to make a lucky guess once in a while? I heard her muttering behind me as we left the chamber and headed for the stairs. You better behave tonight, Safire, or I'll tell Father, she threatened. I paused at the landing and hugged her. I'll be as good as gold and sweet as sugar. The last thing I want to do is ruin your chances with a Landers. When you exaggerate like that, I can't help but think you're teasing me, she grumbled, but her arm slowly encircled me back, her stiffness fading as I drew away the tension she constantly carried with my witch touch. Safire, she said, her tone lowering in admonition as she realized what I was doing. Shh, I whispered. It will help you unwind and enjoy yourself in Sir Landers' company more this evening than you would have otherwise. What harm could there be in that? I stepped back and shook my hands, flinging the last of her apprehension off my fingers. Her whole profile seemed softer and less sharp, her ragged edges smoothed. I do feel better, she admitted. I feel as if I could saunter up to him and start talking and not worry whether I was being too forward or not. Good, I grinned. I didn't need Dagmar to introduce Selwyn of Landers to me. Earnest seriousness oozed off him like thick mud, the same mud that stuck to carriage and cartwheels and made the roads well-nigh impassable in some spots. It was no wonder I immediately thought of sludge in his presence, for his lugubrious aura hung heavily around him, a dull, earthy brown shot through with straight indigo lines. Was this what Dagmar wanted in a husband? His aura would weigh down the air and make it difficult to be merry in his presence. Indeed, the lively music and laughter of the May ball seemed muted and far away now that we stood close to him, even though we were only a few yards from the circle of swaying lanterns and capering shadows of the dancers. However, looking at Dagmar's bright eyes and rosy cheeks, hearing the lilt in her voice as she spoke his name, I realized that she really did want him, or his position at least, and thought he would make her happy. So I kept my teeth poised over my tongue, just in case I had to bite it. In an effort to be pleasant, I said, "Dagmar tells me you have quite a gift for arithmetic and keep all the Landers' account ledgers." He smiled, a tight-mouthed affair. "Why, yes, Lady Safire, I do. I like numbers. There's no room for argument in arithmetic. Either you're right or wrong. There's no in-between." "Yes, in-between can be quite confusing, can't it? All those messy emotions," I remarked, and then glanced down before the dangerous conversational waters of my irony tempted me any further. Luckily, Selwyn seemed immune to irony. "Couldn't agree more, my lady," he said, shaking his head. "Passion has been the downfall of many a man." "Many indeed," I murmured, flicking open my fan so I could hide my smile behind it. "Are you the only Landers here, then?" He nodded. "My kinsman Witten is indisposed," he stammered, then finished hastily, "and my cousin Marius and his father Mordric are at court." "I do so long to go to court. I've never been there." Dagmar rested her fingers lightly on his lower arm as she rescued him from his verbal blunder. Their auras mingled, spring greenery sprouting amidst the mud. He graced her with a soft look, his aura sparking blue where she touched his arm. Despite his disparaging remark about passion, he seemed to feel something for her that had nothing to do with numbers. My smile, still concealed behind my fan, widened. "I was at court for a while," he said. "All the sons of high noble houses attend the academy there." "What's it like?" Dagmar prompted. He shrugged. "I didn't much care for it. I have no gift for courtiers' intrigues. I enjoy staying at Landers Hall, where I can keep an eye on our tenants and ride and hunt and fish when I please." "You sound like our father," Dagmar said, her tone warm with approval. "Come, Selwyn, you've never had the urge to sit on council, never envied Marius and Mordric their influence." Peregrine followed his own voice from the shadows, emerging beside me so silently that I stifled a shocked gasp. His ambergris aura descended on me, a choking cloud that stole my air. "Good evening, Peregrine," Selwyn said. "No, leave the council to ambitious men like you and Mordric. I have no interest in it." I wanted to groan, for it was obvious from Selwyn's deferential tone and words that Peregrine impressed him. Just like my father, blinded by Peregrine's patina of coin and power. Why could no one else seem to see what I saw? "Good evening, Lady Dagmar." "Safire." Peregrine's hand shackled my elbow. I snapped my fan shut and yanked my arm from his grip. "The way you grabbed my arm, like a magistrate might. Have you come to arrest me, Sir Bara?" I inquired coolly, rewarded by witnessing Selwyn's jaw drop. Oh dear, I had just managed to shatter my carefully constructed impression as a demure lady. Damn Peregrine. "Steal you, actually." Peregrine's eyes gleamed with devilish glee. "You steal possessions, you kidnap people. Your language implies that you see me as a jewel or a trinket, not as a flesh-and-blood woman." "Oh, I see you as a woman, sweet. Never doubt that." His gaze traveled down my body with ungentlemanly leisure, and I shuddered, knowing that he had undressed me in his mind. Undressed me the way one might undress a doll. No, that wasn't quite right. He was too bold, too predatory, to be satisfied with a lifeless plaything. I stepped away, swallowing, then glanced toward Dagmar, my eyes pleading for a rescue. But she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Selwyn, who fumbled for her hand. "May I have the honor of this dance, Lady Dagmar?" he asked, so stiff and obviously out of his depth that I cringed for him. Dagmar could have cared less about his lack of suavity. She merely gave a shy little smile and looked down at their clasped hands before she murmured, "Yes." Then they sauntered off, vanishing in the whirl of couples. Usually I would have been happy for her, but not now. Now I wanted to yell after her to come back. However, if I pulled such a stunt, she would be upset with me later. Peregrine saved his rudest behavior and remarks for the rare moments we were alone or Dagmar wasn't paying attention. I was certain Peregrine wouldn't have dared look at me with such obvious lust if Dagmar hadn't been preoccupied with Selwyn. She often thought I was exaggerating when I complained about him, so yelling for her now would only serve to create a scene that would get me in trouble and likely barred from future dances. Quick as a striking snake, Peregrine grasped my wrist, his aura enveloping me, slowly smothering me. I've come to claim my dance, Safire. I haven't said yes. Come, pet. You want to dance, don't you? I'd rather hoped for another partner. Leave me alone. Biting down on the hard words hurt my teeth, the pain of anger rousing me from the sickly sweet stupor of his aura. He twisted me around. What other partner? Do you have another suitor? If I did, it would be none of your affair. His grip tightened on my wrist. I'd make it my affair. No other man can give you what I can give you. No other man can protect you like I can. Peregrine, I don't want what you can give me. I don't want your protection. You don't mean that, Safire. His voice lowered to a soft rumble as he said my name, the purr of a lion stalking tricky prey. I was so tired of people doubting that I meant what I said or ascribing their own meaning to my words that had nothing to do with what I wanted. Didn't anyone ever listen? Mother had listened, but she was gone, and Dagmar and Father didn't understand me. My eyes suddenly floated in a hot ocean of tears, the seawall of my will crumbling away. I had vowed I would never cry before this man, never show him any weakness, yet here I was, fighting back sniffle upon sniffle. His purr deepened. Oh, sweet, I don't like to see you cry. What is it you want? He gently wiped a soft handkerchief under my eyes. For you to leave me alone, please, Peregrine. Anything but that. I mean to marry you when you turn 18. My head swiveled slowly from side to side. I'll never say yes. Oh, I believe you will when the time comes. What does that mean? I demanded, trying to free my wrist from his grip. He smiled with a vulpine flash of teeth. I can be very persuasive and determined. Your father warned me that you're quite stubborn and that I'd best give up my suit and try to win the affections of another lady. But I don't want to do that, Safire. Now, would you please dance with me? I promise I'll leave you alone the rest of the night, if that's what you want. I don't trust your promises. I blew my nose into his handkerchief as loudly and obnoxiously as I could, hoping it would disgust him and he would go away. No such luck, though. He merely grinned and crumpled up the billowy mass and pocketed it. Why? I've given you no reason not to trust my word. After all, I promised I would continue to court you, and I have. Why do you want me so much? I've certainly gone out of my way to insult you, and your own mother hates me. You think I listen to my mother? He scoffed. You should. Maybe she knows what she's talking about when it comes to me. If you mean to be a high courtier, I'll never be a good wife for you. Why not? Peregrine, there's a plethora of girls more highborn than me. Plethora, he repeated. Where do you get these words? I read. A lot. Why did you send back those books I gave you then? Because I'll accept no gifts from you, ever. I'll never be your wife. He stared down at his hand as he slid the edge of his thumbnail under his fingernails one by one. I took a lot of time selecting those titles, Safire. So, I've taken a lot of time devising insults for you. He chuckled. One thing I've never heard you insult is my dancing. What do you say, pet? I bet the devil is an excellent dancer. He threw back his head and laughed, still gripping my wrist. Just then Dagmar and Selwyn returned from the dance, hand in hand, their eyes shining. Oh, what fun! Dagmar caught her breath. Safire, you'll love it. Thank you, Lady Dagmar. I've been trying to persuade her of that very thing, Peregrine said. One dance, that's all I asked for, and she plays coy, the little flirt. Oh, Safire, Dagmar exclaimed, her tone indicating she thought I was being most cruel. Damn him. He always managed to enlist her unwitting aid in making me look either foolish, stubborn, or mean. She won't dance with you, Bara, Selwyn said with an odd smile, the blue lines shimmering like veins of sapphire through his otherwise dull aura. That's because she's a noblewoman, not a bar wench or serving maid. Then he seemed to realize that he had spoken his thought out loud, for he turned brick red and started sputtering, the blue lines fading and twisting into knots of confusion. We're not at the tavern, Selwyn, Peregrine said, his words coated with brittle ice. You'd best save your brave words for when Mirius is here to act as your second. I doubt Witten's sober enough for the task. Come, pet. But, I protested. He ignored me, towing me out into the midst of the dancers. I would have dug my heels in and tried to escape, but I could barely breathe suddenly. Selwyn's remark seemed to have put Peregrine in a vile humor, for his aura spewed choking clouds of ambergris like a mad skunk spraying musk everywhere. Deprived of fresh air, my awareness narrowed to the small circle Peregrine and I made. His large hand splayed against the small of my back. His fingers curled around mine as he guided me with dizzying speed through the steps. My traitor feet tripped along lightly, merrily following his lead as we whirled amidst the crowd. A delight that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with the music of the pipes, drums, and fiddles, and the movement matching their rhythm raced through my veins. I did so love to dance. Peregrine's aura faded as we turned and swayed, his anger at Selwyn with it. He apparently enjoyed this as much as I did. See, Safire, he said, panting a laugh. Even the devil has his moments. He did indeed. It was at these dangerous moments that I felt my resolve to resist him weaken, these dangerous moments when he showed the best parts of himself, his masterful charm, his passion for life, his cleverness. His hand tight around mine, he whirled me away from him and then drew me back as if unwinding a spool of thread and then winding it back again. Then he dipped me down so low the ends of my hair touched the grass of the meadow. I hung there in suspension for several beats of the music, his hand warm and solid through the thin silk of my gown, his eyes intent on mine. Heat tickled deep in my belly and I shuddered. He lifted me as easily as he might lift a feather. He steered us around the other couples and around the musicians, a fiddler's bow almost knocking me in the head. Then suddenly we were alone in the darkness, past the circle of lanterns, his mouth pressed against mine, his taut lips forcing mine apart. He breathed ambergris into my lungs until he was all I could sense. His tongue and teeth bruised my mouth in a rough caress, that intoxicating heat rising from my loins and belly till I thought I might swoon. Oh, dear God, what if I fainted? What would he do to me? He broke off the kiss for an instant, muttering, "Sweet, sweet is goddamned wine with honey." Peregrine, no, let me go. You say that, but you don't mean it. Your blood boils for me, boils for a man who knows how to touch you. He crushed me to him, his wicked mouth swallowing my protest. It dimly occurred to me that he was right, that he understood my shadow side in a way my family never would. My blood did indeed boil with passion, passion that his touch could rouse, but he still frightened me more than he attracted me. The heat inside vanished, a chill taking its place as his grip on my back tightened, his lips traveling to my throat. He bit my tender skin, leaving marks that would take a week to fade. Stop it! Please stop! I had meant to yell, but his aura choked my words so that all that emerged was a hoarse whisper. Say yes, Safire. Just one little word, and I can give you everything you've ever wanted. You can't give me self-respect. You can't give me freedom. There are so many things you can't give me. No man can give me. I can only give them to myself. He lifted his head and stared at me. I could see the lanterns gleaming in his eyes. You say the strangest damn things sometimes. My sisters and mother think you're a lunatic. I don't give a damn what they think. Let go of me. Now that he no longer kissed me, I could finally get enough air in my lungs to yell. I pushed against his chest, but likely my loud use of profanity was what really got his attention. He stepped away, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Slowly, I became aware again of the rise and fall of the music, the laughter and pounding of feet of the dancers, the world beyond me and this demon man with his cunning touch. It didn't seem as if anyone else heard my shout over the din. I felt the sore place on my neck where he had nibbled me with his teeth. "You're mine," he said then. "You know that? You'll always be mine." I turned and bolted back through the crowd, dodging around couples until I emerged on the other side. I leaned against a lantern post and struggled for breath. My lungs felt on fire. I glanced around for Dagmar, but she was nowhere to be seen. How dare he? I touched the place on my neck again where he had marked me. I knew I would have a bruise there tomorrow. A love bite, they called it. Possessive blackguard. If this was his idea of love, then I wanted none of it. How dare he? My mouth curled in a mew of distaste. I didn't belong to him. I didn't belong to anyone except myself, and I would allow no man to brand me or cage me. Tears welled up and dripped down my face. I swiped at them impatiently. Why was it that I cried sometimes when I was angry? Tears should flavor sadness with their salt, not rage. Rage demanded a spicy taste that burned the tongue, like when I had sprinkled powdered ginger in my mouth as a curious toddler. I jumped as a hand curled around my arm. I was grateful when I realized it was Dagmar. Selwyn hovered behind her, and now I found his staid aura comforting rather than monotonous. I doubted he had ever bitten a girl's neck, or even thought about biting a girl's neck. "Safire," she asked, "are you all right, sweet?" I shook my head. "Peregrine trod on my foot when we were dancing," I managed over the lump in my throat. "It hurts." I wanted to tell her the truth, but not with Selwyn listening. She clucked her tongue as if I were a child crying over a scraped knee. "Here, let me look at it." She started to lean down. "Which one is it?" "No, I'll be fine." I touched her shoulder and she straightened, looking at me. "You don't want to get grass stains on your frock. Why don't you and Selwyn have another dance?" "Where is Peregrine? Did he just leave you?" she demanded. "No, he most certainly did not," came Peregrine's deeply amused voice. "She left me, the naughty creature. Here," he said, handing me a glass of spiced wine. I cringed as his fingers brushed against mine. "I don't want this. For all I know, it's poisoned," I spat, tempted to throw the wine in his face until I remembered we had an audience. "Safire, I know he hurt your foot, but I'm sure he didn't mean to. It's certainly no reason to be so rude," Dagmar said severely. She really did treat me like a child sometimes. "Would you like some wine, Dagmar?" Selwyn asked. "Your foot?" Peregrine hissed. "What is she talking about?" I stared straight ahead into the dark night, ignoring him. The branches and leaves of the trees at the edge of the pasture wove black lace against the deep blue of the sky. It was at moments like these I ached for some canvas and pigments and brushes and someone to show me how to use them. If Peregrine were an artist, I might even agree to marry the brute just so I could learn how to paint. I was that desperate to feel the colors inside pouring out of my fingertips.